Bitter winds swept through Elkhorn Creek as Emma Harper huddled beneath the old saloon's awning, her thin coat no match for the Montana winter. 3 days without food, nowhere to sleep, and one tattered suitcase to her name. The townsfolk had made their judgment clear. A woman alone was unwelcome. Then Jackson Cole appeared, his shadow falling across her face. The wealthiest rancher for 100 miles stood before her, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. "Miss," he said, removing his hat, "I have a proposition." His words were simple, his offer impossible. But what choice did she have? Could a marriage built on desperation ever become something real? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma clutched her tattered suitcase tighter, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The proposition hung in the frigid air between them. "A wife?" she repeated, certain she'd misheard through the howling wind. Jackson Cole stood unmoving, his tall frame blocking the worst of the snowfall. At 45, his face was weathered by sun and hardship, eyes the color of Montana sky in summer. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but striking, commanding. "Yes, ma'am. A wife." His voice was level, matter-of-fact. "I need someone to run my household. You need shelter and security." Emma studied him warily. She'd heard of Jackson Cole since arriving in Elkhorn Creek 3 weeks ago. Everyone had. Owner of the largest cattle operation in the territory, a man who kept to himself except for business. No family. No scandals. Just wealth and a reputation for fair dealing. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You've been in town nearly a month. Sought honest work. Been turned away everywhere. Yet you haven't begged or compromised yourself." He gestured to her muddied but carefully mended dress. "Pride. Determination. Qualities I respect." Emma flinched. He'd been watching her. The realization should have frightened her, but instead, it sparked indignation. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Cole." "But because this isn't charity. It's a business arrangement." He shifted, revealing a horse tethered nearby. "Room and board. A monthly allowance. Security. In exchange for cooking, cleaning, and presenting as my wife at necessary social functions. Nothing more required." Nothing more. The implication was clear. This wouldn't be a real marriage in all senses. Emma's mind raced. 6 months ago, she'd had a home, a father, a future. Now her father was dead, their Pennsylvania farm seized by creditors, and she'd spent her last dollar on the stagecoach west, chasing rumors of opportunity. Instead, she'd found closed doors and suspicious glares. "Why not hire a housekeeper?" she asked. "Tried. 3 left in the past year. 2 isolated." He paused. A wife has different motivations. Shared interests in the property's success. The cold bit deeper. Emma had nowhere to go. The last boarding house had asked her to leave that morning when she couldn't pay. Her stomach cramped with hunger. "If I accept," she said carefully, "I would expect a proper marriage contract. Legal protections." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Of course, we can see Judge Parker today." "And separate sleeping quarters." He nodded once. "The house has 4 bedrooms." Emma took a deep breath. "I don't know the first thing about ranching. Not asking you to. Just need the house managed so I can focus on the business." A particularly vicious gust of wind cut through her thin coat, making her shiver violently. Jackson Cole noticed. "Miss Harper, I'm offering security, not romance. You're facing a Montana winter with no shelter and no prospects. I'm facing another season with a house falling into disrepair while I manage 3,000 acres and 500 head of cattle. We can solve each other's problems." He was right. What choice did she really have? Emma straightened her spine, summoning the last of her dignity. "I accept your proposition, Mr. Cole." He nodded, unsurprised. "We'll need to stop at Donovan's store first. You'll need proper clothes." 2 hours later, Emma stood in the judge's office wearing a simple gray dress that actually fit. The mud-stained wedding dress hung in Judge Parker's coat closet, a hasty purchase from the general store's limited selection. Mrs. Donovan had tooted and fussed, clearly disapproving yet unwilling to refuse Jackson Cole's business. The ceremony took less than 5 minutes. No rings were exchanged. The judge, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, seemed unfazed by the unusual circumstances. Perhaps he'd seen stranger things in this frontier town. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole," he said without enthusiasm, stamping their marriage certificate. Emma stared at the document. Emma Cole. A new name to go with her new life. A life purchased with pragmatism rather than love. As they left the courthouse, snow falling heavier now, Jackson helped her into his wagon with formal courtesy. Neither spoke as they began the journey to what was now, for better or worse, her home. Emma Harper had become Emma Cole, a wife in name only, to a stranger who needed a housekeeper badly enough to marry one. That the Cole ranch materialized through the falling snow like something from a storybook, a grand 2-story house with a wide porch, flanked by sturdy outbuildings and framed by distant mountains. Emma sat straighter in the wagon, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "That's the main house," Jackson said, breaking their hour-long silence. "Bunkhouse is to the left. Barn and stables beyond." As they drew closer, Emma noted peeling paint on the porch columns and missing shingles on the roof. The grandeur remained, but maintenance had clearly been neglected. Jackson reined the horses to a stop. Before he could come around, Emma climbed down herself, determined to establish her independence from the start. Her new husband nodded slightly, perhaps approving of her self-sufficiency. 3 men emerged from the bunkhouse, approaching with unconcealed curiosity. "Boys, this is Mrs. Cole," Jackson announced, the name still foreign to Emma's ears. "My wife." The stunned silence that followed told Emma everything about how unexpected this development was. A weathered man with silver-streaked hair recovered first, extending a calloused hand. "Welcome. I'm Pete Sullivan, foreman going on 15 years. Emma shook his hand firmly. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Sullivan." The younger men introduced themselves as Miguel Reyes and Hank Donner. Their respectful nods couldn't hide their surprise, but neither did they show the disdain Emma had grown accustomed to in town. "Miguel, help with Mrs. Cole's things," Jackson instructed. "Hank, see to the horses." Almost laughed at the mention of things, just her single battered suitcase. Miguel collected it with care, as though handling fine china. Jackson led her up the porch steps. The heavy front door opened to a spacious entryway with a grand staircase. A fine layer of dust covered the polished wood banister. "Your mother had beautiful taste," Emma observed, noting the quality of the furnishings beneath their neglected state. Jackson's eyebrows rose slightly. "You have a good eye. She designed everything herself." He showed her through downstairs rooms, a formal parlor, dining room, study, and kitchen. Everything spoke of former elegance now faded from neglect. The kitchen, at least, showed signs of regular use, though utensils and dishes were haphazardly organized. "This would be your domain primarily," Jackson said. "Lorna Simmons comes twice weekly to help with heavier cleaning, but she's getting on in years." Emma nodded, mentally cataloging all that needed attention. The ranch ledger sat open on a desk in the study, its pages filled with meticulous figures in a strong, precise hand. Upstairs, Jackson showed her to a bedroom at the east end of the hall. "I thought you might prefer this room. Gets the morning light." The room was surprisingly lovely, with a 4-poster bed, dressing table, and washstand. A window seat overlooked the ranch yard and distant pastures. "My room is at the opposite end of the hall," he added, confirming their arrangement. "There's a bathing room between, with a pump installed 2 years ago. Hot water requires heating on the stove, I'm afraid." "This is more than adequate," Emma said quietly, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her fortunes. This morning, she'd awakened behind the livery with nowhere to go. Tonight, she had a home, however conditional. "I'll leave you to settle in," Jackson said. "Supper in an hour, if you're feeling up to it. Otherwise, I can bring something up." "I'll be down," Emma said firmly. "I'd like to begin as I mean to go on, Mr. Cole." "Jackson," he corrected. "Might as well use my given name, considering." After he left, Emma sank onto the bed, its softness almost unbearable after weeks of hard floors and park benches. She allowed herself exactly 1 minute of overwhelming emotion before standing resolutely. Opening her suitcase, she removed her few possessions: 2 faded dresses, undergarments carefully mended, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, and her father's pocket watch, the only thing she'd managed to keep from the creditors. Beneath everything lay a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, her mother's smile bright with genuine happiness. "Not exactly the marriage you hoped for me, father," she whispered, "but I'll make the best of it." Emma washed in the basin, donned her least wrinkled dress, and pinned her hair neatly. She studied her reflection in the mirror: thin face, shadows beneath her eyes, but chin held high. Mrs. Emma Cole, she thought. A name and title of convenience, but perhaps also of opportunity. Shoulders back, she headed downstairs to prepare for her first dinner in her new home. Dawn broke cold and clear over the ranch. Emma had been awake for hours, too accustomed to vigilance to sleep deeply in this strange new place. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth from day one. The pantry was decently stocked but poorly organized. Coffee beans sat beside salt pork, flour mingled with dried beans. Emma set to work, bringing order to chaos while the stove heated. By the time she heard movement upstairs, she had coffee brewing and biscuits in the oven. Jackson appeared in the doorway, hat already in hand, clearly prepared to head out without breakfast. "Good morning," Emma said, pouring coffee into a heavy mug. "Breakfast will be ready shortly." Surprise flickered across his features. He nodded, accepting the coffee. "Usually just grab something on the way out." "Part of our arrangement is proper meals," Emma reminded him, sliding a plate of biscuits and eggs onto the table. "I intend to fulfill my obligations." He sat down, awkwardness hovering between them. "You settled in all right?" "Yes, thank you." Emma busied herself at the stove. "I'll need to take inventory today. Learn where everything is." Jackson ate efficiently, without comment on the food. When he finished, he stood, reaching for his hat. "I'll be checking the north pasture today. Won't be back until supper." After he left, Emma attacked the kitchen with determination, scrubbing surfaces neglected for too long. In a cupboard above the stove, she discovered a leather-bound cookbook. Opening it reverently, she found elegant handwriting on the flyleaf. Elizabeth Cole, 1845. Jackson's mother, she presumed. The pages contained not just recipes but notes about the ranch, the changing seasons, and family milestones. "Jackson lost his first tooth today," one margin note read. Asterisk, Robert laughed so hard he nearly choked on his coffee. Asterisk, a family that had once filled this house with life. Emma was still paging through the cookbook when a sharp knock at the back door startled her. A stout woman with iron-gray hair and suspicious eyes stood on the threshold. "You must be Mrs. Simmons," Emma said, recognizing the housekeeper Jackson had mentioned. "And you must be the new Mrs. Cole," Lorna replied, her tone making clear she found the development improbable. She looked Emma up and down. Towns buzzing about how the richest rancher in the county married a homeless girl. Emma refused to be cowed. "I understand you come Tuesdays and Fridays? I'd appreciate your guidance on the household routines." Lorna sniffed but seemed marginally appeased by Emma's deference to her experience. "Been keeping this house 15 years, since Miss Elizabeth passed. Do the heavy laundry and help with canning and such." Throughout the morning, Emma learned the rhythms of the ranch house. When the men took breaks, what supplies came from town versus what they produced themselves, which parts of the vast house were rarely used. "Mr. Cole keeps to himself mostly," Lorna offered, softening slightly as Emma worked alongside her without complaint. "Been that way since his parents died. Fever took them both, winter of '62. By afternoon, Emma had made significant progress in the kitchen and started planning meals for the week. The ranch hands would need substantial fare, especially with winter setting in. Her first attempt at supper, a hearty stew with the last of the garden vegetables, was met with appreciative silence from the tired men. Jackson nodded his thanks, his eyes lingering on the organized kitchen behind her. That night, Emma's muscles ached from unaccustomed labor, but satisfaction warmed her more than the fire Jackson had built before retiring to his study. She had made a start, had been useful. In the days that followed, Emma established routines. Breakfast before dawn, cleaning and baking until midday, afternoons for mending and organizing the neglected household, supper preparations as the sun lowered. Her first disaster came 3 days in. Attempting to recreate a bread recipe from Elizabeth's cookbook, she misjudged the temperamental oven's heat. The resulting loaves could have served as building material. Jackson found her nearly in tears, furiously needing a second batch. "The men won't starve from one failed loaf," he said quietly. "I need to contribute," Emma replied, not looking up. "That was our agreement. The kitchen's already cleaner than it's been in years. You're fulfilling your part." The unexpected kindness nearly undid her. Emma straightened her shoulders. "Thank you, but I intend to master this oven if it's the last thing I do." Something that might have been amusement crossed Jackson's face. "Stubborn," he observed, not unkindly. "Determined," Emma corrected, and was rewarded with the first genuine smile she'd seen from her husband of convenience. A month passed, marked by the steady rhythm of ranch life. Emma's hands, once soft from her previous life, grew calloused from work. Her cheeks, hollowed by hunger, filled out with regular meals. Each night, she fell into exhausted sleep, grateful for the roof over her head and the growing sense of purpose. The kitchen became truly hers, organized to her preferences, stocked with her preserved jams and pickles. The men now lingered over meals, a testament to her improving culinary skills. One frigid evening, Emma sat by the fire in the parlor, knitting a scarf from wool Miguel's wife Maria had given her. The ranch hands had wives or families in town where they spent weekends, leaving the main house to its silent residents. The front door opened, bringing a gust of cold air, and Jackson, his coat dusted with snow. "Storm's getting worse," he said, hanging his hat. He hesitated at the parlor entrance, as if unsure of his welcome in the space Emma had brought back to life. "I've kept coffee warm," she offered, setting aside her knitting. He nodded thanks, disappearing into the kitchen. He returned with a steaming cup and, to Emma's surprise, settled in the chair opposite hers. "The scarf's coming along well," he observed. Emma glanced up. "You noticed I was making it?" "I notice more than you might think." His voice held no particular inflection, yet Emma felt her cheeks warm. Silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable. Outside, wind howled around the eaves. "I saw you looking over the ledger yesterday," Jackson said finally. Emma tensed. "I was dusting the study. I didn't mean to pry." "No need to apologize. It's your home too." He studied her over his coffee cup. "You seem to understand what you were reading." "My father taught me bookkeeping for our farm. Said a woman should know business matters." Jackson considered this. "The monthly cattle receipts need organizing. If you'd like something beyond household duties." The offer surprised her. "I'd be happy to help." Another stretch of silence, broken only by the crackling fire. "First big snow," Jackson remarked. "Winter's setting in proper now." Emma thought of past winters, her father stoking the stove while her mother read aloud. Warmth and family, now gone. "Christmas will be here before we know it," she said without thinking. Jackson stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Don't usually mark the occasion." "Oh." Emma focused on her knitting. "Of course, whatever you prefer." Later that week, Emma rode with Jackson into town for supplies. Her first appearance as Mrs. Cole caused quite a stir. Women who had previously ignored her existence now studied her with unconcealed curiosity. At the general store, Mrs. Donovan's greeting held frost. "Mrs. Cole, what a surprise. We were all wondering when Mr. Cole would introduce his bride." Emma straightened her spine. "Good morning, Mrs. Donovan. We need supplies for the month." The older woman's smile thinned. "Of course, though our selection may not meet the standards you're accustomed to." "I'm sure everything will be perfectly adequate," Emma replied evenly. Mrs. Farnsworth, the banker's wife, entered the store, her eyebrows rising dramatically at the sight of Emma. "Well, Mrs. Cole, is it? What a fortunate change in circumstances." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks but maintained her composure. "Indeed. Would you excuse us? We have much to accomplish today." As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Jackson observed, "You handled that well. I've faced worse than small-town gossips." His expression softened imperceptibly. "Still, can't be pleasant." Emma shrugged. "They'll find something new to discuss eventually." The weeks continued to pass. Emma learned the ranch's rhythms, which pastures flooded in heavy rain, how the cattle behaved before storms, which horses could be trusted and which were troublemakers. One evening, Jackson found her poring over the ledgers, making careful notes. "Found something?" he asked, surprising her. Emma pointed to a column of figures. "You're paying too much for grain. Wilson's charging you above market rate." Jackson leaned over her shoulder to see, close enough that Emma could smell leather and pine. "You're right," he said, sounding impressed. "I've been too busy to compare prices." "I can handle supply negotiations if you'd like," Emma offered. Jackson studied her with new eyes. "Seems I got more than a housekeeper in this arrangement." As December deepened, Emma secretly began Christmas preparations. Nothing elaborate, just small gestures to mark the season. Pine boughs over the mantel. Cinnamon in the morning coffee. On Christmas Eve, Jackson returned from rounds to find the house filled with the scent of gingerbread and a small fir tree in the parlor, decorated with paper stars and dried berries. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, expression unreadable. Emma braced for disapproval. "I know you said you don't usually celebrate, but—" "It's been a long time," he interrupted quietly, "since this house felt like Christmas." January brought bitter cold and an unexpected visitor. Emma was kneading bread dough when the sound of an approaching carriage drew her to the window. A sleek black coach with matched bay horses, far too elegant for local traffic, pulled into the ranch yard. Emma wiped her hands on her apron as a well-dressed gentleman descended, his fine wool coat and leather gloves marking him as wealthy. Something in his bearing suggested connection to Jackson, the same tall frame and proud posture, though this man carried himself with cultivated sophistication rather than rugged competence. Jackson emerged from the barn, surprise evident even at a distance. The men exchanged a brief embrace that appeared more formal than affectionate. Emma hurried to tidy herself, removing her apron and smoothing her hair. By the time the men entered, she had composed herself at the kitchen doorway. "Emma," Jackson said, an unfamiliar tension in his voice, "this is my cousin, Philip Harrington, from Boston. Mrs. Cole." Philip's smile didn't reach his eyes as he assessed her. "What is surprised to discover Jackson has married." "Mr. Harrington," Emma nodded politely. "Welcome to Cole Ranch. You must be tired after your journey." "Indeed." His gaze swept the kitchen, clean but plainly functional. "I've been traveling for nearly a fortnight. Civilization seems more distant with each passing mile." "I'll prepare a room," Emma said, catching Jackson's imperceptible nod of approval. As she turned to leave, an envelope fell from Philip's coat, heavy cream stationery with an embossed letterhead. Emma retrieved it, glimpsing Harrington and Cole Investments, Boston, before handing it back. "Thank you, Mrs. Cole." Philip tucked it away. A family business matter that requires Jackson's attention. Over the next days, Philip's presence disrupted the comfortable routine Emma and Jackson had established. Meals became formal affairs rather than companionable silences. Jackson spent evenings closeted with his cousin in the study rather than reviewing ranch accounts with Emma. Philip treated Emma with cool courtesy that barely masked his disapproval. His questions probed her background while seeming innocuous. "And your family, Mrs. Cole? What business were they in?" "My father was a farmer in Pennsylvania," Emma answered honestly, feeling Jackson's attention sharpen. "How pastoral." Philip smiled thinly. "And what circumstances brought you all the way to Montana?" Before Emma could respond, Jackson interrupted. "Emma's resourcefulness is what matters. She's transformed this house in just months." Philip's smile tightened. "Yes, quite efficient, I'm sure." On the third evening, Emma was carrying linens past the study when Philip's voice carried through the partially open door. "Can't be serious about this marriage, Jackson. A penniless drifter with no connections? What would your mother say?" Emma froze, heart pounding. "My arrangements are not your concern." Jackson's voice was cold. They become my concern when they affect the family interests. Papers rustled. This offer from Blackwood Mining is exceptional. Sell the ranch, return to Boston, and rejoin civilized society with a suitable match from a proper family. I've no interest in selling. Or in Boston society. Because of her? This convenient wife? Surely she can be compensated and sent on her way. Unless there's more to this arrangement than practicality? Emma backed away silently, chest tight with humiliation. Of course, Philip saw through their marriage of convenience. But his dismissal stung more than she'd expected. That night, Emma lay awake, thoughts churning. She'd foolishly begun to believe she belonged here, that her contributions mattered. Now Philip's presence reminded her how tenuous her position truly was. At breakfast, Philip announced his departure. I've made my case, cousin. Consider the offer. Boston society would welcome you back, with a more appropriate companion, of course. His gaze flicked dismissively over Emma. She kept her expression neutral, serving coffee with steady hands. After seeing Philip off, Jackson found Emma in the kitchen, her movements jerky with suppressed emotion. You heard our conversation. Not a question. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Jackson sighed. Philip lives in a different world. His opinions don't matter here. But he's right, isn't he? Emma set down a plate with careful control. I'm not a suitable wife for someone of your standing. Just a convenient solution to a practical problem. Is that what you think? Jackson's voice held an emotion Emma couldn't identify. It's what we agreed to, she replied. A business arrangement. Jackson studied her for a long moment. Philip brought an offer for the ranch. Considerable money. Fear clutched at Emma's heart. Will you sell? No. His certainty surprised her. This is my home. Our home now. Our home. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to examine. I should check on the garden plans, Emma said, needing distance from emotions she hadn't anticipated. Jackson nodded, allowing her retreat. But something had shifted between them. A question neither had asked now lingered unspoken. When had their arrangement of convenience begun to feel like something more? Winter's icy grip finally loosened its hold on Elkhorn Creek. Snowdrifts receded, revealing muddy earth eager for sun. The ranch stirred with renewed energy, cattle being moved to fresh pastures, repairs long postponed now urgent, garden plots awaiting attention. Emma stood on the porch one morning, breathing deeply of the damp, earthy scent of approaching spring. In her hand, she clutched a small paper packet, flower seeds she'd purchased with her own money, saved carefully from the allowance Jackson had insisted on providing. Planning your garden? Jackson's voice startled her. He'd become quieter in his movements around her, less like an employer and more like something she couldn't quite name. Emma nodded. Vegetables mostly, but these are marigolds. Good for keeping pests away from the tomatoes. And for brightening the place up, he observed. That too. Emma smiled, then hesitated. I don't want to overstep. If you'd prefer I focus on practical plantings. Emma. Her name in his voice still felt new. This is your home. Plant what pleases you. Since Philip's visit 2 months ago, something had shifted between them. Jackson sought her company more often, lingering over meals to discuss ranch matters or sitting with her by the fire in companionable silence. I thought I might ride out with you today, Emma ventured. If you're checking the east pasture. I should learn more about the ranch operations. Surprise flickered across Jackson's face, followed by consideration. You ride? Not well, she admitted. But I can learn. That afternoon found them in the corral, Jackson adjusting stirrups on a gentle mare named Willow. She's steady, won't spook easily. Emma eyed the horse warily. Her previous riding experience consisted of plodding farm horses, not the spirited stock needed for ranch work. I'll look foolish, she muttered. No shame in learning. Jackson offered his hand, helping her mount. His grip was warm and sure, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Everyone starts somewhere. Over the following weeks, these rides became routine. Emma progressed from nervous clutching to comfortable posting, from supervised circuits around the corral to accompanying Jackson on his daily rounds. Spring advanced rapidly. Emma's garden took shape, neat rows of vegetables interspersed with cheerful marigolds and sturdy sunflowers. The house windows stood open to fresh breezes, winter's mustiness banished by spring cleaning. One golden evening, they rode to a ridge overlooking the ranch. Spread below them, the Cole property stretched toward distant mountains, pastures dotted with cattle, the silver thread of a creek, the cluster of buildings that was home. "It's beautiful," Emma said softly. Jackson nodded, pride evident in his profile. "My father started with nothing. Worked alongside his men until the day he died." He gestured toward the western boundary. "Planning to expand there next year. Good water access." Emma studied the landscape with new eyes, seeing not just its beauty but its potential. The lower field would be good for hay production. Save on winter feed costs. Jackson turned to her, surprise and something like admiration in his expression. "You've been studying the operations." "I've been paying attention," she corrected. "It matters to me, the ranch's success." "Why?" The question was gentle but probing. Emma considered her answer carefully. "At first, because my security depended on it. Now." She trailed off, uncertain how to express the growing sense of belonging, of investment in this place and the man beside her. "Now," he prompted. "Now it's home," she said simply. Jackson nodded, understanding in his eyes. They sat in silence as the sun dipped lower, painting the land in amber and gold. "My mother loved this spot," he said unexpectedly. "Used to bring a book up here in summer, read for hours." Emma treasured this rare personal revelation. What was she like? Strong. Gentle too. Educated, gave up Boston society to follow my father west. A faint smile touched his lips. Never complained, even in the early years when they lived in a one-room cabin. "You must miss them," Emma said softly. "Every day." Jackson's gaze remained on the horizon. "Lost them both to fever the same winter. I was 24. Emma thought of her own father, gone just months ago yet feeling like another lifetime. The missing doesn't stop, does it? No. Jackson turned to her, their shared grief creating an unexpected intimacy. But it changes. Becomes part of you rather than consuming you. As twilight deepened, they rode home side by side. At the stable, Jackson helped Emma dismount, his hands at her waist. For a moment, they stood close enough that Emma could feel the warmth of him, see the weathered lines around his eyes. His hand moved as if to touch her face, then fell away. "We should head in. Getting chilly." That night, Emma sat by her bedroom window, watching stars emerge over the ranch, their ranch. Her fingers absently traced the path Jackson's hand might have taken across her cheek, and she wondered when exactly their arrangement of convenience had begun to feel so inconveniently like something else entirely. The town hall buzzed with tension as Emma followed Jackson inside. It was her first public appearance at a community meeting, and the sidelong glances from Elkhorn Creek's residents made her self-conscious. Still, she held her head high, her simple blue dress the finest she owned but modest compared to the elaborate ensembles of the bankers' and merchants' wives. "Quite a turnout," she murmured to Jackson, surveying the packed room. "Water rights bring everyone out." His expression was grim. "This affects every ranch and farm in the valley." Judge Parker called the meeting to order, gesturing to a man Emma didn't recognize, expensively dressed, with a neat beard and calculating eyes. "Mr. Edward Blackwood of Blackwood Mining," Parker announced. "He's requested this meeting to address concerns about Silver Creek water access." Blackwood stepped forward with practiced confidence. "Thank you for coming, neighbors. I understand there's been some concern about our operations upstream." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I assure you, Blackwood Mining has every legal right to utilize the water required for our extraction processes." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Amos Fletcher, who owned a small farm bordering Cole Ranch, stood up. "My creek's running at half its normal flow. Crops are suffering. Stock can't drink." Other ranchers voiced similar complaints: dwindling water levels, contaminated pools, cattle falling ill. "Regrettable but not our responsibility," Blackwood replied smoothly. "Natural fluctuations occur. We're operating within our legal rights. Not if you've diverted the main channel, Jackson spoke up, his deep voice cutting through the noise. The Territorial Water Compact of '67 specifically prohibits altering natural waterways to the detriment of established agricultural operations. Blackwood's smile tightened. Mr. Cole. Always a pleasure. I believe you'll find our permits in order. I believe a site inspection would prove otherwise, Jackson countered. Emma studied the newspaper clipping Jackson had shown her that morning, a small article announcing Blackwood Mining's acquisition of upstream properties, buried on the back page as if intentionally minimized. Without planning to speak, Emma found herself on her feet. Mr. Blackwood, the watershed maps in the county office clearly show Silver Creek as the primary water source for 17 ranches and farms. What studies have you conducted on the environmental impact of your operations? The room fell silent. Women didn't typically speak at town meetings, and certainly not homeless women recently married into respectability. Blackwood recovered quickly, his smile now decidedly cold. Mrs. Cole, is it? How refreshing to see a new bride taking interest in her husband's affairs. Heat flushed Emma's cheeks, but she held her ground. Water rights affect everyone in this community, Mr. Blackwood. I believe that makes it everyone's affair. Jackson's hand brushed her arm as she sat down, a brief touch of support that didn't go unnoticed by watchful eyes. The meeting continued, growing increasingly heated. Blackwood presented permits of questionable providence, while ranchers described devastating effects on their operations. Perhaps, Blackwood suggested silkily, smaller operators should consider selling to those with resources to weather these natural challenges. Blackwood Mining offers fair compensation for properties. Several of your neighbors have already accepted our generous terms. Bullied into selling, more like, muttered a voice from the back. Judge Parker eventually called for a committee to investigate the claims, scheduling another meeting for the following month. As the crowd dispersed, Blackwood approached Jackson and Emma. Mr. Cole. His assessment was coolly appraising. Your property has the most extensive water rights in the valley. We should discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. My water rights aren't for sale, Jackson replied flatly. Blackwood's gaze shifted to Emma, something calculating in his expression. Mrs. Cole. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. The background must make this new position quite an adjustment. The implication was clear. He knew about her circumstances before marriage. I find honest work and straightforward dealings quite comfortable, Mr. Blackwood, Emma replied evenly. It's deception and manipulation that would feel foreign to me. Something dangerous flashed in Blackwood's eyes. Careful, Mrs. Cole. New brides should focus on domestic harmony rather than business matters they don't fully understand. My wife understands perfectly, Jackson said, his voice deceptively calm. And her observations are usually worth heeding. Blackwood's smile was all teeth. How progressive of you. I do wonder what your Boston relations would think of such an arrangement. The ride home was tense, Jackson's jaw set in a hard line. He's not just after water, Emma said as the ranch came into view. He wants the land too. Jackson nodded. Mining companies are buying up ranches all through the territory. They strip the resources, leave the land ruined, and move on. He seemed to know about me, Emma said quietly. About where you found me. Jackson's eyes met hers. Does that worry you? Emma considered the question. Once, the revelation of her desperate beginnings would have mortified her. No, she said firmly. I'm not ashamed of surviving. But I am concerned he'll use it against you somehow. Jackson's expression softened. Against us, he corrected. We're in this together, Emma. Together. Words that no longer referred to a mere business arrangement but something more complex and unexpectedly precious. Dark clouds gathered on the western horizon, rolling over the mountains like a living thing. Emma watched from the kitchen window as Jackson and the ranch hands moved with urgent purpose, securing equipment and herding livestock toward sheltered pastures. Bad one coming, old Pete had warned at breakfast. Barometers dropping fast. Emma had spent the morning preparing, filling lamps, storing water, baking extra bread. Montana's spring storms could isolate the ranch for days. The first fat raindrop struck the window just as Jackson strode into the kitchen, his expression grave. "We've got trouble. 24 head moved to the high pasture yesterday. Won't survive if the creek floods." "Can you reach them?" Emma asked, already reaching for her coat. Jackson shook his head. "Too dangerous to send the men with the lightning." "But you're going." "Not a question." His eyes met hers. "Have to try." Emma tied on her boots. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." Jackson's tone was final. "Stay here where it's safe." "You need an extra pair of hands," Emma insisted. "I can ride well enough now." "Emma." "We'll lose time arguing," she said firmly. "I'm coming." Something shifted in Jackson's expression, surprise giving way to reluctant respect. He nodded once, sharply. "Stay close. Do exactly as I say." The wind nearly knocked Emma sideways as they rode out, rain pelting them like tiny bullets. Willow nickered nervously beneath her, but the mare held steady. Jackson led them along a ridge trail, the valley falling away to their right. "Creek's already rising," he shouted over the wind, pointing to the swollen waterway below. They reached the high pasture to find the cattle huddled miserably under a stand of pines. Lightning cracked overhead, spooking the already nervous animals. "We'll need to move them single file through the narrow pass," Jackson called. "I'll lead. You keep them from bolting backward." Emma nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. She positioned Willow at the rear of the herd while Jackson began urging the lead steer toward the trail. For nearly an hour, they worked in drenching rain, moving the reluctant cattle down the treacherous slope. Emma's muscles screamed from the effort of controlling Willow while keeping the herd moving forward. Twice, steers tried to break away, and only her quick maneuvering prevented disaster. They were halfway down when disaster struck. Lightning hit a tree near the trail, sending a massive branch crashing down. Cattle scattered in panic. 3 broke away, heading straight for a steep drop-off. Without thinking, Emma spurred Willow forward, cutting between the fleeing steers and the cliff edge. The mare responded beautifully, darting in front of the lead steer, forcing the animals to turn back toward the main herd. When Emma rejoined Jackson, rain streaming down her face, he stared at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen," he said finally. Emma managed a shaky smile. "Perhaps both." By the time they reached the ranch, dusk was falling. They worked silently, efficiently, settling the cattle in the lower pasture's shelter. Emma's hands were raw, her body chilled to the bone despite her heavy coat. In the barn, Jackson helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "You're freezing." "Worth it," Emma said through chattering teeth. "We saved them all." Jackson's face was illuminated briefly by lightning, his expression unguarded in that flash of brightness. Concern, admiration, and something deeper etched in the lines of his face. "You could have been killed," he said quietly. "So could you." Emma met his gaze steadily. "That's why I couldn't let you go alone." The main house was dark when they entered, the storm having knocked out the power lines from town. Emma lit a lamp while Jackson built a fire in the parlor hearth. They worked in companionable silence, moving around each other with newfound ease. Emma brought blankets from the chest, wrapping one around her shoulders. When she handed one to Jackson, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. "Why did you really come with me today?" Jackson asked, firelight playing across his features. Emma considered deflection, then chose honesty. "Because I couldn't bear it if something happened to you while I waited safely at home." Jackson reached into a nearby bookshelf, withdrawing a slim volume bound in faded leather. "My mother's," he explained, opening to a marked page. "Poetry she used to read during storms." He handed Emma the book, their hands touching again. This time, Jackson's fingers deliberately enfolded hers. "Thank you," he said simply. "For today. For everything these past months." Emma felt something shift between them, the careful distance they had maintained giving way to something new and fragile. "Read to me," Jackson asked, his voice low. As the storm raged outside, Emma read verses about courage and devotion by firelight, acutely aware of Jackson's gaze upon her and the steady warmth of his hands still covering hers, summer unfurled across the valley, painting the ranch in vibrant greens and golds. Days lengthened, filled with constant activity, cattle to move, hay to cut, vegetables to harvest from Emma's thriving garden. The rhythms of ranch life had become second nature to her now, her body strengthened by purposeful work, her mind engaged by the business challenges Jackson increasingly shared with her. Something else had blossomed since the spring storm, a cautious intimacy. Nothing dramatic, just small shifts. Jackson's hand at the small of her back as they walked to the barn, shared coffee on the porch at dawn, quiet conversations that stretched into evening. The separate bedrooms remained, but the emotional distance had narrowed considerably. Midsummer socials next Saturday, Jackson mentioned one evening as they reviewed the ledgers on the porch. Town tradition. Dancing, food, that sort of thing. Emma looked up, surprised. You usually attend? Make an appearance, he corrected. Expected of the larger ranchers. Usually leave early. He hesitated. Thought you might like to go this year. As a proper introduction to the community. The unexpected invitation warmed her. I'd like that. Later that week, a package arrived from the mercantile. Inside, Emma found a dress of deep blue cotton, simple but beautifully made, with a fitted bodice and full skirt perfect for dancing. I hope it fits, Jackson said from the doorway, uncharacteristically uncertain. Mrs. Peterson helped with the sizing. Said it was the latest style. Emma touched the fabric reverently. It's beautiful. But you didn't need to. Wanted to, he interrupted gently. You deserve something nice. The night of the social, Emma stood before her mirror, hardly recognizing herself. 6 months of good food and hard work had filled out her once gaunt frame. Her hair, now grown past her shoulders, was pinned up with a few curls framing her face. The blue dress fit perfectly, bringing out the color in her eyes. Downstairs, Jackson waited in his best suit, his tall frame somehow more imposing in formal wear. When Emma descended the stairs, his expression made her breath catch, surprise, admiration, and something deeper transforming his usually stoic features. You look, he began, then shook his head slightly. Words fail me, Emma. She felt a blush warm her cheeks. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Cole. The town hall had been transformed with lanterns and summer flowers. As they entered, conversation faltered momentarily before resuming with increased intensity. Emma felt the weight of curious stares but found herself caring less than she'd expected. Mrs. Farnsworth approached immediately, her smile tight with curiosity. Mrs. Cole, how lovely to see you properly. We were beginning to think Jackson was keeping you hidden away. Not hidden, Emma replied pleasantly. Just busy learning to be a rancher's wife. Such a rapid education, Mrs. Farnsworth murmured. From such humble beginnings, too. Jackson's hand tightened on Emma's arm. My wife has adapted admirably to ranch life. Better than most born to it. The pride in his voice silenced Mrs. Farnsworth momentarily. She recovered quickly. Will you be joining the Ladies' Aid Society, Mrs. Cole? We're always looking for new perspectives. Perhaps, Emma replied noncommittally. Once we're past the busy season. They moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on their marriage and fielding thinly veiled inquiries about its circumstances. Emma handled each interaction with a composure that surprised even herself. You're winning them over, Jackson murmured as they accepted cups of punch. Hardly, Emma laughed softly. But I'm not letting them intimidate me either. The band struck up a waltz. Jackson set down his cup and extended his hand. Dance with me? Emma hesitated. I'm not very practiced. Neither am I, he admitted. But I'd like to dance with my wife. My wife. Not you or Emma, but my wife, claimed belonging. Emma placed her hand in his and let him lead her onto the floor. Jackson was more graceful than he'd let on, guiding her confidently through the steps. Emma gradually relaxed, allowing herself to enjoy the warmth of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his shaving soap, the rare public closeness. Thank you, she said quietly as they turned. For the dance. For this chance. To be part of something. To belong somewhere again. Jackson's eyes held hers, saying things his words hadn't yet formed. Emma, well, if it isn't the happy couple. Edward Blackwood's smooth voice cut between them as the music ended. Mrs. Cole, enchanting as always. Jackson, a moment of your time? Business matter. Jackson's expression cooled. Not tonight, Blackwood. This is a social occasion. Just a brief word about the Water Rights Committee, Blackwood pressed. Unless your wife objects to a moment's business conversation? My wife, Jackson said deliberately, has excellent business sense. Anything you need to say to me can be said in her presence. Blackwood's smile tightened. How modern. Very well. The committee has decided against your petition. The water diversion will continue. That's impossible, Emma interjected. The evidence clearly showed. Evidence can be interpreted many ways, Mrs. Cole, Blackwood interrupted smoothly. As can marriage certificates issued rather hastily. The threat hung in the air between them. Jackson stepped forward, tension radiating from his frame. Emma placed a restraining hand on his arm. Threatening a lady at a social gathering, she observed coolly. How very uncivilized, Mr. Blackwood. Not a threat, Mrs. Cole. Merely an observation that glass houses stones. Blackwood tipped his hat. Enjoy your evening. The drive home was quiet, both processing the confrontation. As they reached the ranch, the full moon illuminated the porch in silver light. Jackson helped Emma down, but instead of releasing her, he kept her close. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For Blackwood. For the gossip. For all of it. I'm not, Emma replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. I wouldn't change our arrangement, unusual as it began. Jackson's hand came up to touch her cheek. Hasn't been just an arrangement for some time now, has it? Emma's heart thundered. No, she whispered. Not just an arrangement. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Jackson lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, then deepening as Emma responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as years of loneliness melted away under the Montana moon. Emma hummed softly as she dusted the study shelves, smiling at the memory of Jackson's kiss the previous night. They hadn't discussed it at breakfast, both seemingly shy in the light of day, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The arrangement that had begun in desperation had blossomed into what? Not quite love, perhaps, but something warming in that direction. Reaching behind a row of ledgers, her cloth caught on something. Emma carefully extracted a wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. She hesitated, aware she was crossing into Jackson's private domain. But curiosity won out. Inside lay a daguerreotype in a silver frame. Jackson, perhaps 10 years younger, standing beside a beautiful dark-haired woman in an elegant dress. Their poses were formal, yet the woman's hand rested possessively on Jackson's arm. The betrothal portrait, Emma guessed. Her stomach tightened uncomfortably. Jackson had never mentioned a previous engagement. The woman was clearly wealthy, her dress and jewelry speaking of Eastern refinement, exactly the type of suitable match Philip had mentioned. That's Catherine. Emma startled, nearly dropping the photograph. Jackson stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I was dusting and found it. I shouldn't have pried. Jackson crossed to her, taking the photograph. His thumb brushed over the woman's image. It was a long time ago. Emma waited, sensing he might say more if she remained silent. We were engaged, he continued finally. She was from Boston. Our families had adjacent summer homes in Newport. The merger made sense, her family's shipping business, my family's investments. What happened? Emma asked softly. Jackson's jaw tightened. She found a better merger. James Harrington, Philip's older brother. Wealthier, more connected, heir to the family business. His voice had grown flat. I discovered the arrangement when I returned from inspecting our Montana holdings. The wedding invitations had already been sent. Emma's heart ached for him. I'm sorry. I left Boston the next day. Came here permanently. Jackson set the photograph down. My father had just died. The ranch needed managing. It was convenient. The word hung between them, echoing their own beginning. You loved her, Emma observed quietly. Jackson considered this. I thought I did. Or perhaps I loved the idea. The perfect match, the combined fortunes, the Newport summers. He looked at Emma directly. I've learned there are more important qualities in a partner. The implication warmed her, but Emma's insecurities surfaced. Is that why you never returned to Boston? Because she was there with your cousin? Initially, yes, Jackson admitted. Later, because I discovered I preferred honest work to society games. The ranch became more than an escape, it became home. Emma nodded, understanding completely. Thank you for telling me. Jackson studied her. Does it bother you? Knowing about Catherine? Not that she existed, Emma said carefully. But I wonder if I'm simply convenient in a different way. Another arrangement. Jackson stepped closer, his hand gently tilting her chin upward. Last night wasn't convenience, Emma. The kiss that followed was different from the previous nights, deeper, more certain. Emma responded without hesitation, her arms slipping around his neck as his hands spanned her waist. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. I should have told you about Catherine sooner. There are no other secrets between us now. But Emma tensed, guilt surging through her. Jackson, The study door burst open as Miguel rushed in. Boss, riders coming, Blackwood and 3 men. The moment shattered, Jackson immediately alert. Stay inside, Emma. No, she said firmly. Whatever Blackwood wants, we face together. Jackson nodded reluctantly. Together, They stood side by side on the porch as Blackwood and his men rode up. The mining magnate's expression was smugly triumphant. Cole, he called, dismounting. Just the couple I wanted to see. State your business, Blackwood, Jackson replied coldly. Merely delivering news. Blackwood withdrew an official-looking document. The territorial governor has approved our water usage petition. Your counterclaim is denied. Jackson's expression remained impassive, though Emma felt him tense beside her. We'll appeal. Of course, Blackwood smiled thinly. Though the courts move slowly. Your ranch needs water now, not after months of litigation. He glanced meaningfully at Emma. I'm prepared to offer a generous purchase price. Enough to provide handsomely for you both. Not interested, Jackson said flatly. Blackwood sighed theatrically. I was afraid you'd say that. Which brings me to my other purpose. His gaze fixed on Emma. I've been making inquiries about your lovely wife. Fascinating background. Ice formed in Emma's stomach. My past is not your concern. Perhaps not, Blackwood agreed pleasantly. But a father's suicide after gambling debts? Creditors hounding his daughter across state lines? Such scandal would interest Elkhorn Creek's upstanding citizens. Jackson stepped forward, fury radiating from him. Get off my property. Consider my offer, Cole, Blackwood called as he remounted. Before things become unpleasant for your bride. As the riders disappeared down the drive, Jackson turned to Emma, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. Emma? What was he talking about? Emma felt the fragile happiness of the morning crumbling around her. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, about who I really am. The summer's sun beat down mercilessly, baking the land to a dusty brown. Emma stood on the porch, staring at the empty rain gauge, the 3rd consecutive week without precipitation. In the distance, Silver Creek had dwindled to a trickle, its banks exposed and cracking. It's worse upstream, Jackson said, coming to stand beside her. Fletcher's place is bone dry. Had to sell half his herd at rock-bottom prices. Since Emma's confession about her father's gambling debts and suicide, the scandal that had driven her west, Jackson had been thoughtful but not condemning. His simple, thank you for telling me, had lifted an enormous weight from her shoulders. Blackwood's dam is the real problem, not just the drought, Emma said, pointing to the barely visible stream. The creek should have more flow even in dry conditions. Jackson nodded grimly. We've managed to shift the herd to the north pasture where the spring's still running, but it won't support them much longer. Emma gestured toward the kitchen. I've cut water usage in the house by half. Washing only essentials, reusing cooking water for the garden. Every bit helps. Jackson squeezed her shoulder appreciatively. Though the garden may be a lost cause this year. Emma's carefully tended vegetables were withering despite her efforts. Only the hardiest herbs survived, their scent sharp in the dry air. 3 neighboring ranches have sold to Blackwood in the past month, Jackson said quietly. Can't blame them. Without water. We're not selling, Emma stated firmly. Jackson's smile was tired but genuine. No, we're not. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table with maps and ledgers spread before them. The house was stifling despite open windows, the usual evening breeze absent. If we redirect some of the spring water, Jackson traced a path on the map, we might irrigate the lower south field. That would take all the men working round the clock, Emma countered, wiping perspiration from her brow. And the spring's output is already dropping. They worked late into the night, calculating water needs, feed reserves, and how long they could sustain operations under current conditions. Emma's business knowledge proved invaluable as they sought creative solutions to the mounting crisis. As midnight approached, Jackson leaned back, rubbing his eyes. We should get some rest. Emma nodded tiredly, gathering scattered papers. Her hand brushed his as they reached for the same document. What once would have been an awkward moment had become comfortable intimacy. Jackson caught her fingers, raising them to his lips in a gesture that still made her heart flutter. We'll get through this, he said softly. Together, she agreed. Sleep proved elusive in the stifling heat. Emma tossed restlessly, her mind churning with worry. After an hour, she gave up, donning a light robe over her nightgown and heading downstairs for water. She found Jackson on the porch, similarly sleepless, stripped down to trousers and an open shirt in concession to the heat. Can't sleep either? He asked as she joined him. Emma shook her head, settling beside him on the porch swing. Too hot. Too many thoughts. They sat in companionable silence, watching stars wheel overhead in the cloudless sky. I rode up to the headwaters today, Jackson said finally. Blackwood's dam is twice the size it was last month. They've completely diverted the main channel. That can't be legal, Emma protested. Legal or not, it's done. And with the committee ruling in his favor. Emma's mind raced. The Territorial Water Compact specifically addresses natural waterways. If we could prove he's completely blocked the creek rather than just using some of the water. We'd need documentation. Witnesses. More than just my word against his. A plan began forming in Emma's mind. What if we organized the remaining ranchers? Strength in numbers. Worth trying, Jackson agreed. Though many are afraid of Blackwood's influence. There's something else. Emma hesitated. I've been studying old land records at the county office. Blackwood's mining claims might overlap with protected watershed areas. Jackson turned to her, surprise evident. When did you do this research? Last time we were in town. While you met with the banker. Emma smiled slightly. I'm not just a pretty face around the house, you know. Jackson's laugh was low and warm. Emma Cole, you never cease to amaze me. His expression grew serious. I don't know what I would have done these past months without you. Probably still be eating burned biscuits and living in dust, she teased. More than that. His hand found hers in the darkness. You've become essential. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Not just useful. Not just convenient. Essential. Emma's breath caught as Jackson leaned closer, his lips finding hers with practiced ease now. What began as comfort deepened into something more urgent, months of growing affection and attraction crystallizing in the hot summer night. When they finally separated, both breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. We should try to sleep. Tomorrow will be another long day. Emma nodded, reluctantly pulling away. At the door she paused. Jackson? What Blackwood said about my past, do you think he'll follow through with his threat? Almost certainly, Jackson replied honestly. But we'll face that together too. As another week passed without rain, tensions escalated throughout the valley. 2 more ranches sold to Blackwood. Water hauled from town became prohibitively expensive. The spring feeding the north pasture slowed to a concerning trickle. Jackson organized a meeting of remaining ranchers at Cole Ranch. 8 men gathered in the parlor, expressions grim as they discussed dwindling options. "Blackwood offered me 30% below value yesterday," Amos Fletcher reported. "Said the price would drop another 10% next week." "He's creating the crisis, then profiting from it," Emma observed, serving coffee to the group. "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Cole," one rancher said hesitantly, "but what chance do we have against Blackwood Mining? They've got money lawyers, the governor's ear." "We have water rights dating back generations," Jackson countered. "And Emma's research suggests their dam violates federal regulations, not just territorial ones." The men looked at Emma with new respect as she outlined her findings, pointing out discrepancies in Blackwood's permits and claims. "If we document the dam's construction and file a federal complaint," she concluded, "we might force an inspection. Meanwhile, we share resources," Jackson added. "Pool equipment, coordinate water hauling, rotate grazing access." For the first time in weeks, hope flickered amid the gathering. As the ranchers departed with a plan in place, Emma felt Jackson's hand at the small of her back, a touch that had become as natural as breathing. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "They listened to you." Emma smiled tiredly. "Let's hope it makes a difference." That night, checking the rain gauge one final time before bed, Emma found it still painfully empty. But as she looked up at the vast Montana sky, she felt something else filling the space around her heart, a certainty that whatever challenges came, she was exactly where she belonged. The crunch of approaching horses drew Emma from the kitchen where she'd been preserving the last of the garden's meager harvest. Through the window, she spotted Edward Blackwood's distinctive black gelding leading a small procession toward the house. Her stomach tightened with apprehension. "Jackson," she called toward the barn where he'd been repairing equipment. "Blackwood's here." By the time she stepped onto the porch, Jackson had joined her, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension evident in his stance. Together they watched Blackwood and 2 men, one clearly a lawyer with his city clothes and portfolio, dismount and approach. "Cole," Blackwood greeted with false joviality. "Mrs. Cole. Lovely day, isn't it?" "State your business, Blackwood," Jackson replied tersely. The mining magnate smiled thinly. "Always direct." "Very well." He gestured to the suited man. "This is Mr. Grimes, my attorney. He's prepared a generous offer for your property." "Not interested," Jackson said immediately. "At least hear the terms." Blackwood nodded to Grimes, who withdrew papers from his portfolio. $5,000, twice the current market value given the water difficulties. Emma couldn't suppress a small gasp. It was indeed a substantial sum, especially for land struggling through drought. "The deed stays with us," Jackson stated firmly. Blackwood sighed. Theatrically. "I anticipated your reluctance." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. "Perhaps this might persuade you." Emma recognized her father's handwriting on the partially visible letter inside the envelope. Her blood ran cold. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "I have associates in Pennsylvania," Blackwood replied smoothly. "Fascinating reading, your father's desperate letters to creditors before his unfortunate incident. Details about embezzlement from his own church's building fund. Quite scandalous." Jackson stepped forward, hands clenched. "Get off my property." "Consider carefully, Cole," Blackwood continued, unperturbed. "This information would devastate your wife's standing in the community. And yours by association. The respectable ranchers of Elkhorn Creek might reconsider their alliance once they learn they've partnered with the daughter of a thief and suicide." Emma felt physically ill but kept her voice steady. "Those letters were private family matters." "Indeed." Blackwood smiled coldly. "Private matters best kept private, wouldn't you agree? $5,000 buys both your ranch and my discretion." Jackson turned to Emma, his eyes questioning. She shook her head slightly. "No sale," Jackson told Blackwood firmly. "My wife has nothing to be ashamed of." "Noble," Blackwood sneered. "But foolish. My offer decreases by $500 each week. Meanwhile, your creek remains dry, your cattle thirsty, and soon." He patted the envelope. "The whole territory will know about Mrs. Cole's sordid history." "Is that all?" Jackson's voice was dangerously calm. "For now." Blackwood returned the envelope to his pocket. "I'll give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, both the price and my patience diminish." After the unwelcome visitors departed, Emma stood frozen on the porch, shame and anger warring within her. "I should leave," she said suddenly. "That's what he wants. If I'm gone, maybe he'll negotiate fairly on the water rights without using me against you." "No." Jackson's response was immediate and firm. His hands grasped her shoulders. "That's exactly what he wants, to divide us." "But the ranch means nothing without you," Jackson interrupted. "Emma, look at me." She raised her eyes reluctantly to his. "Your father's mistakes aren't yours," he said gently. "You've nothing to be ashamed of." "The community won't see it that way," Emma whispered. "Suicide alone is scandalous enough. Add embezzlement, gambling debts. They'll say you were deceived into marriage with a woman from corrupt stock. Let them talk." Jackson's hands moved to cradle her face. "This marriage may have started as an arrangement, but it's become much more. At least for me." Emma's heart thundered in her chest. "For me too," she admitted softly. The kiss that followed was different from their previous ones. Deeper, imbued with emotion too long contained. When they finally separated, both breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "We'll fight Blackwood together," he promised. "The ranch, the water rights, the gossip, all of it." That evening, they sat at the kitchen table with the ranch's deeds spread before them, the physical embodiment of generations of Cole family history and effort. "My father would have liked you," Jackson said unexpectedly. "He valued grit and honesty above all else." Emma smiled faintly. "My father would have admired you too. He always said character reveals itself in adversity." "Is that why you agreed to marry me?" Jackson asked. "You saw character in my proposition?" "I saw survival," Emma admitted. "But I found much more." She hesitated. "Jackson, if the worst happens, if Blackwood exposes my past and we lose community support for the water rights fight, then we'll face it." His hand covered hers. "Together." "Together," Emma echoed, the word a promise and declaration rolled into one. Later, as they prepared for bed, still in separate rooms despite their growing closeness, Jackson paused at Emma's door. "I love you," he said simply, the words hanging in the air between them like a tangible thing. "I should have said it before now. Whatever happens with Blackwood, with the ranch, that won't change." Emma's heart soared even as tears pricked her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for months." His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Get some sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow we start fighting back." As Emma lay in bed that night, worry still gnawed at her edges, but something stronger had taken root at her core. A certainty that whatever came next, the love that had grown from their practical arrangement was real and enduring. Blackwood might threaten their ranch, their reputation, even their livelihood, but he couldn't touch what had blossomed between them. For the first time since her father's death, Emma fell asleep feeling not just safe, but truly home. The leather-bound journal lay open on Emma's lap, its pages filled with her neat handwriting. 4 weeks, she'd been recording ranch happenings, business calculations, and increasingly, her feelings for Jackson. Tonight, she added a new entry, her decision to fully confront her past. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jackson stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded, setting aside the journal. Since their declarations of love 3 days ago, a new tenderness had developed between them, gentle touches, lingering glances, the comfort of shared understanding. Jackson settled beside her on the window seat. "Pete spotted Blackwood's men near the north boundary today. Just watching, not trespassing." "Intimidation," Emma said. "He wants us anxious. It's working on the neighbors. Fletcher's packing up, took Blackwood's reduced offer." Emma sighed. With each departing rancher, their coalition weakened. "Jackson, I need to tell you everything. About my father, about Pennsylvania." If Blackwood's going to spread rumors, you should know the full truth first. Jackson took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. I'm listening. Emma took a deep breath. My father was the treasurer for our church in Harrisburg. A respected position for a respected man. But he had a secret weakness: gambling. Cards, horses, anything with odds. She stared out at the darkening ranch yard. 4 years he managed to keep his two worlds separate. Then came the church building expansion. Jackson listened silently as Emma described how her father had borrowed from the building fund, certain he could replace it with his winnings, a cycle that spiraled out of control. When the church council requested a full accounting, he knew he couldn't hide it anymore. $5,200 missing, a fortune. Emma's voice grew tight. That night, he wrote letters to the church elders confessing everything, left one for me explaining why, then walked into his study and used his hunting rifle. Jackson's hand tightened around hers. I found him, Emma whispered, along with my letter. He'd given me instructions to sell everything, pay what debts I could, then leave before the scandal broke. She brushed away a tear. The next morning, creditors were already circling. Our neighbors, people who dined at our table for years, crossed the street to avoid me. You were innocent in all of it, Jackson said quietly. Emma nodded. But guilt transfers easily in small towns. I sold everything except my mother's wedding ring and my father's pocket watch. It covered barely half his debts. The church elders agreed not to press charges if I signed over our home to help recover the embezzled funds. Her voice hardened. They spoke of Christian charity while watching me pack my single suitcase. So you came west? As far as my remaining money would take me. Emma turned to him fully. That's everything, Jackson. The full, ugly truth that Blackwood is holding over us. Jackson's eyes, steady on hers, held no judgment. Thank you for trusting me with it. You deserve to know exactly what you're defending. Emma's fingers traced the edge of her journal. I understand if it changes things between us. The only thing it changes, Jackson said firmly, is my admiration for your strength. He cupped her cheek. You survived that tragedy, maintained your dignity, and built a new life. If anything, I love you more for knowing your full story. The simple statement unlocked something final in Emma's heart, the fear that her past would always stand between them, that his love was somehow conditional on her being untainted by scandal. When Jackson kissed her, it felt like absolution. Not because she needed forgiveness, but because he accepted every piece of her history as part of the woman he loved. They remained talking late into the night, the intimacy of shared secrets bringing them closer than physical touch ever could. Jackson spoke more of his own past. His complicated relationship with his father, his disillusionment with Boston society, his grief when both parents died so suddenly. I closed myself off after that, he admitted. The ranch became everything. Until you. As moonlight streamed through the window, casting silver patterns across the bed, their conversation gave way to tender touches and whispered words of love. Their first time together felt like a culmination rather than a beginning, the natural expression of a connection that had been building since that snowy day in front of the saloon. Afterward, Jackson held Emma close, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. And every night. I'd like that, she whispered back. Morning found them still entwined, Emma waking to the unfamiliar but welcome weight of Jackson's arm around her waist. For a moment, she simply savored the feeling, belonging, security, love freely given and received. Then reality intruded as she remembered Blackwood's deadline was approaching. 3 more days until he would potentially expose her past to the community. Jackson stirred beside her, immediately alert to her tension. What is it? Just thinking about what comes next, she admitted. If Blackwood follows through. Then we face it, Jackson said simply, pulling her closer. Your past doesn't define you, Emma. The woman who transformed this house, who impressed hardened ranchers with her business sense, who stood beside me through drought and threats, that's who you are. Emma smiled against his shoulder. When did you become so wise? When I found a wife who needed a home, he replied, echoing the proposition that had brought them together. And discovered I needed her far more than she needed any roof I could provide. Later that morning, as they shared coffee on the porch, Emma watched a rider approaching at a gallop, Miguel, returning from town earlier than expected. "Boss?" he called, dismounting in a cloud of dust. "News from town. Blackwood's called a meeting for tomorrow. Says he has important information about water rights the whole community needs to hear." Jackson and Emma exchanged glances, understanding passing between them. Blackwood was making his move. "Then we'll be there," Jackson said calmly. "All of us." As Miguel headed toward the bunkhouse, Jackson turned to Emma. "Are you ready for this?" Emma squared her shoulders, drawing strength from his steady presence and the love they'd affirmed. "Yes," she said with quiet certainty. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The town hall was packed to capacity, buzzing with speculation. Blackwood had promoted the meeting extensively, promising revelations that would change the course of Elkhorn Creek's future. Emma felt eyes tracking her movement as she and Jackson entered, their fingers intertwined in silent solidarity. In the 6 months since she'd arrived desperate and homeless, Emma had transformed into Mrs. Cole, composed, dignified, dressed in a simple but well-made dress that reflected her position as wife to one of the territory's largest landowners. Yet beneath her calm exterior, her heart pounded. Today, that carefully constructed identity might crumble. "Quite a turnout," Jackson murmured, guiding her towards seats near the front. Emma nodded, noting the mix of townspeople and ranchers. Many nodded respectfully to Jackson, some even offered Emma tentative smiles. Those small gestures strengthened her resolve. Judge Parker called the meeting to order just as Blackwood strode in, flanked by his lawyer and several associates. His confident smirk when he spotted Emma sent ice through her veins. "Citizens of Elkhorn Creek," Parker began, "Mr. Blackwood has requested this gathering to discuss water rights issues affecting our community." Blackwood rose, adjusting his expensive jacket. "Thank you, Judge. Indeed, water rights are central to our discussion today, but so too are questions of character and trustworthiness." His gaze fixed meaningfully on Emma. "Before making critical decisions about our valley's future, we should understand exactly who we're dealing with." Jackson's hand tightened around Emma's. "The Water Compact Committee has ruled in favor of Blackwood Mining's operations," Blackwood continued smoothly. "Yet certain elements, led by Jackson Cole and his wife, continue to obstruct progress that would bring prosperity to our region." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Perhaps," Blackwood suggested with manufactured concern, "their opposition stems not from genuine water concerns, but from personal motives. Perhaps," his voice lowered dramatically, "we should examine the character of those who would presume to lead this community in opposition to legal, profitable enterprise." Emma felt the room's attention shift to her like a physical weight. "Mrs. Cole," Blackwood said, withdrawing familiar papers from his jacket, "would you care to explain to your neighbors the circumstances that drove you from Pennsylvania? Or shall I read your father's confession?" A tense silence fell. Emma rose slowly, her legs surprisingly steady. "Mr. Blackwood believes these papers give him power over me," she said, her clear voice carrying through the hall. "He's right that my father took his own life after embezzling from our church's building fund to cover gambling debts." Gasps and whispers erupted around the room. Emma continued before they could swell. "I discovered his body and his confession letter 6 months ago. I sold everything I owned to repay as much of his debt as possible, then came west with nothing but a single suitcase and the hope of starting anew." She surveyed the faces watching her, some shocked, others calculating, a few showing unexpected compassion. "I'm not my father," Emma stated firmly. "His mistakes were his own. But I won't hide from the truth or be manipulated by those who would use his tragedy for their gain." Blackwood's triumphant expression faltered slightly. "As for why we oppose Blackwood Mining's operations," Emma continued, gaining confidence, "it has nothing to do with my past and everything to do with this." She nodded to Jackson, who stood and unrolled a large document, a survey map marked with detailed notations. "This territorial survey," Jackson explained, "clearly shows Blackwood's dam violates federal watershed regulations." Their water diversion isn't just inconvenient, it's illegal. Blackwood stepped forward angrily. Those surveys are outdated. Our permits were approved by officials who received substantial investments from Blackwood Mining, Emma interjected, extracting a document from her reticule. As these bank records indicate. The room erupted in chaos. Judge Parker pounded his gavel for order. These are serious allegations, he declared. Substantiated ones, Emma replied. She turned to address the crowd directly. I came to Elkhorn Creek with nothing. Jackson Cole offered me shelter when no one else would. What began as an arrangement of convenience has become the greatest blessing of my life. Her gaze swept the room, making eye contact with those who had once judged her. I understand judgment. I've faced it before. But I also understand second chances. This community has the chance to protect its future against those who would exploit it for short-term profit. Mrs. Farnsworth, the banker's wife who had been particularly cold to Emma, unexpectedly rose. My husband has expressed concerns about the mining company's financial dealings for months, she stated. Perhaps we should examine these allegations thoroughly before allowing further water diversion. Others joined in, momentum shifting palpably. The meeting devolved into heated debate, with increasing support for investigating Blackwood's operations. Blackwood pushed through the crowd toward Emma, his face contorted with anger. This isn't over, he hissed. You think confessing your sordid history changes anything? I'll still have this valley. Step back, Blackwood, Jackson warned, moving protectively toward Emma. Or what, Cole? Blackwood sneered. You'll defend your charity case? Everyone knows why you really married her. Convenient household help with benefits. Before Jackson could respond, Emma stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, you miscalculated. You thought exposing my past would destroy me, that shame would make me retreat. She smiled coolly. But when you have nothing left to lose, you find the freedom to stand firmly for what matters. Sheriff Miller approached, having noticed the confrontation. Everything all right here? Just fine, Sheriff, Emma replied without breaking eye contact with Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood was just leaving. As Blackwood stalked away, Jackson pulled Emma into a brief embrace, oblivious to watching eyes. You were magnificent, he murmured. The meeting concluded with the formation of a new committee to investigate Blackwood's operations and water usage, this time including ordinary citizens alongside officials. As they prepared to leave, Emma found herself surrounded by townswomen, led by Mrs. Peterson from the general store. That took courage, the older woman said simply. The Ladies' Aid Society meets Wednesdays. We could use someone with your backbone. Emma blinked back unexpected tears at this small gesture of acceptance. Thank you. I'd be honored. Outside, Jackson helped Emma into their wagon, his eyes shining with pride and love. Ready to go home? He asked. Not just a shelter offered in desperation, but a place built together through adversity and growing love. Yes, Emma replied, her heart full. Let's go home. The urgent pounding on their door came just after dawn. Emma, already dressed and preparing breakfast, reached it first. Young Billy Fletcher stood on the porch, his horse lathered from hard riding, a telegram clutched in his hand. Mrs. Cole, he gasped, Pa sent me with this. Said it's urgent. Emma accepted the yellow paper, thanking him as Jackson appeared behind her. She read it aloud. Blackwood hiring men stop plan to destroy dam and flood coal ranch stop warning from friend in mining office stop coming tonight stop. Jackson's expression hardened. Get inside, Billy. Emma, feed the boy while I gather the men. Within the hour, the ranch hands assembled in the kitchen. Billy had confirmed his father's warning. Amos Fletcher's brother worked as a clerk in Blackwood's Helena office and had overheard plans to sabotage the dam under cover of darkness. The dam's upstream, Miguel pointed out. If they blow it, a wall of water would hit us with no warning, Jackson finished grimly. Destroy buildings, drown livestock, possibly kill anyone in its path. But why? Old Pete asked. Destroying his own dam makes no sense. It's not about sense, Emma interjected, setting coffee before the men. It's revenge. We humiliated him publicly. Now he'll destroy what we won't sell him. Jackson nodded. The investigation committee meets tomorrow. Blackwood knows he's losing control. This is his last desperate move. What do we do, boss? We defend what's ours. Jackson unrolled a map of the property across the table. Blackwood's men will likely come through Sweetwater Canyon. It's the direct route from the dam to our main pastures. The men leaned forward as Jackson outlined defensive positions, high ground to watch approaches, strategic points to intercept riders, contingency plans if the dam actually breached. I'll ride to town for the sheriff, Hank volunteered. Jackson shook his head. Blackwood's too smart to be directly connected to this. We'd have no proof until after the damage is done. Then we stop them ourselves, Miguel said firmly. No gunplay, Jackson warned. We defend and deter only. I won't have bloodshed on this land. He turned to Billy. Ride home. Tell your father to warn the neighbors downstream. Everyone should move stock to higher ground, just in case. As the men dispersed to prepare, Emma pulled Jackson aside. I'm staying, she said before he could suggest otherwise. Emma. This is my home too, she interrupted. I won't run while you defend it. Jackson studied her, recognizing the determination in her eyes. Stay in the house at least. I'll prepare food and medical supplies, she agreed. But if the worst happens, I need to know the evacuation plan. Relief and love mingled in Jackson's expression. North Ridge, he said, pointing to the map. If you hear 3 long whistle blasts, take nothing but yourself to the North Ridge. Throughout the day, the ranch transformed into a fortress of quiet preparation. Valuables and important documents were moved to upper floors. Livestock was shifted to elevated pastures. Lookouts were positioned on strategic ridges. As dusk approached, Emma stood with Jackson on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The beauty of the moment stood in stark contrast to the tension humming through the air. It's strange, Emma said softly. 6 months ago, I had nothing to lose. Now you have everything to fight for, Jackson finished, drawing her close. As do I. They remained there, memorizing the feel of each other, his strength, her warmth, until the fading light compelled them to separate. Jackson checked his watch. They'll come after full dark, he said. 2, maybe 3 hours. Emma nodded, reluctant to let go. Be careful. Jackson cupped her face between his hands. Whatever happens tonight, Emma Cole, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Better than a proper Boston society match? She teased gently, trying to lighten the moment. Infinitely better. His kiss was tender yet urgent. A promise, a farewell, a declaration. As Jackson joined the men at the barn, Emma returned to the kitchen, channeling her anxiety into practical action. She prepared sandwiches, filled canteens, gathered bandages and medicines. Her hands remained steady even as her mind raced through possibilities, some too terrible to dwell upon. At the window, she watched darkness blanket the ranch. Lanterns remained unlit by Jackson's order, better to move in darkness than become targets. Occasionally she glimpsed shadows shifting position, ranch hands taking up defensive posts. The telegram sat on the table where she'd placed it hours earlier. Emma picked it up, reading the terse warning again. Blackwood's desperation made him dangerous. If he couldn't have the Cole ranch, he would destroy it, along with Emma's hard-won happiness. A rider appeared at the edge of the property, Miguel returning from his scouting mission. Emma watched him dismount and hurry toward Jackson's position near the main barn. Their gestures, visible in the moonlight, conveyed urgency. Minutes later, Jackson slipped through the back door, his expression grim. 8 riders approaching from the canyon, he reported. Armed. Miguel recognized Blackwood's foreman among them. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. What's the plan? Pete and Hank are moving to cut off their approach. I've sent 2 men to guard the creek bank where they'd need to place explosives. He checked his rifle. I'm heading to the South Ridge for a better vantage point. And me? Jackson's eyes softened. You stay safe. That's your only job tonight. He hesitated. If this goes badly... It won't, Emma interrupted fiercely. We've faced worse together. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Indeed we have, Mrs. Cole." He kissed her quickly, then was gone, slipping back into the darkness. Alone in the kitchen, Emma moved to the window again. The moon illuminated the familiar landscape, the barn, the corrals, the fields beyond. All of it home now, in a way no place had been since her father's death. "I won't lose this too," she whispered, a prayer and a promise combined. Whatever came in the darkness, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her west with nothing but a single suitcase and desperate hope. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, each chime reverberating through the silent house. Emma paced the kitchen, jumping at every sound from outside. 2 hours had passed since Jackson had left, with only brief updates from Miguel confirming that Blackwood's men had been spotted near the creek. A soft whistle, their prearranged signal, drew her to the back door. Jackson slipped inside, his expression tense. "They've split into 2 groups," he reported quietly. 4 men headed toward the dam with explosives. The others are moving toward the main house. A diversion, Emma realized. Jackson nodded. "Pete and Hank are tracking the dam group. I came back to make sure you're safe." A sudden flicker of movement through the window caught Emma's eye. "There," she whispered, pointing to shadows approaching the barn. Jackson moved to the rifle rack, then hesitated. "I won't start a shooting war." "Wait." Emma hurried to the study, returning with a stack of papers. The legal documents proving Blackwood's water theft. "If the sheriff arrives, we'll need these." A crash from outside interrupted them, someone breaking into the storage shed. Jackson pressed the rifle into Emma's hands. "Stay here. Bolt the door behind me." "Jackson, promise me." His eyes held hers intensely. Emma nodded reluctantly. "Be careful." After securing the door behind him, Emma moved to the window, watching Jackson's shadow melt into the darkness. The ranch had gone eerily quiet, the usual night sounds, crickets, distant cattle, silenced by tension. A sudden shout broke the stillness, followed by the sounds of struggle. Emma clutched the rifle tighter, heart pounding. Minutes crawled by with no sign of Jackson. Then a flare of light erupted near the creek, a lantern uncovered. More shouting, the thunder of hoofbeats. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Emma grabbed the legal papers and slipped out the side door. Keeping to the shadows, she moved toward the commotion at the creek bank. The scene that greeted her was chaos, ranch hands grappling with Blackwood's men, horses rearing in panic, someone shouting orders. Then she spotted Jackson, locked in struggle with a burly man at the creek's edge. They teetered dangerously close to the rushing water, where Emma could see what looked like bundles of dynamite already positioned along the bank. Horror froze her momentarily as Jackson lost his footing, nearly toppling into the creek. Without thinking, Emma raised the rifle and fired into the air. The sharp crack momentarily halted the melee, all eyes turning toward her. "The sheriff is coming," she shouted with more confidence than she felt. "Drop your weapons." The moment's distraction was enough for Jackson to regain his advantage, subduing his opponent with a powerful blow. The other ranch hands quickly overpowered their adversaries. As if summoned by her bluff, lanterns appeared at the property boundary, riders approaching fast. Emma's relief turned to dread as she recognized Edward Blackwood himself leading the group. "Reinforcements," one of the captured men called out. "You're outnumbered now, Cole." But as the riders drew closer, Emma saw with shock that alongside Blackwood rode Sheriff Miller and several deputies. "What's the meaning of this, Cole?" the sheriff demanded, dismounting. "Blackwood here says you're threatening his men." "His men were placing explosives on my property," Jackson countered, gesturing to the creek bank where the dynamite bundles were clearly visible. Blackwood sneered. "Ridiculous. My men were inspecting the waterway as is our right under the territorial agreement." "With dynamite?" Emma stepped forward, clutching the documents. "Sheriff, we have proof that Mr. Blackwood has been illegally diverting water. These men were sent to destroy evidence before tomorrow's committee meeting." Sheriff Miller examined the dynamite bundles, his expression darkening. "This looks mighty suspicious, Blackwood. You'll take their word over mine?" Blackwood's composure slipped. The word of a woman who came here penniless and a rancher desperate enough to marry her? Emma held out the papers calmly. Not our word. Evidence. Documentation of illegal water diversion, falsified permits, and bribery of officials. The sheriff accepted the papers, scanning them with increasing concern. These are serious allegations. Fabrications, Blackwood snarled. Then you won't mind explaining them to Judge Parker, Miller replied, along with why your men were carrying enough dynamite to blow out half the creek bank. One of Blackwood's captured men, a young worker barely out of his teens, broke suddenly. Mr. Blackwood ordered us to flood the ranch, he blurted. Said it would look like a natural dam breach. No one was supposed to get hurt, just scare them into selling. Blackwood lunged toward the young man, but deputies intercepted him. Liar, he shouted, struggling against their grip. I'll ruin you. The young man faltered but stood his ground. I've got family downstream. Flooding could have killed people. Sheriff Miller nodded to his deputies. Take Mr. Blackwood and his men into custody. Conspiracy, attempted destruction of property, endangerment. As the sheriff read out charges, Emma moved to Jackson's side, relief washing through her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, holding her close as Blackwood was led away, still protesting his innocence. It's over, she whispered. Thanks to you, Jackson replied, brushing dirt from her cheek. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen. Emma smiled up at him, echoing his words from the spring storm. Perhaps both. Dawn was breaking as the last of the deputies departed, taking statements and evidence with them. The ranch hands, exhausted but triumphant, gathered on the porch where Emma had prepared coffee and breakfast. You've got yourself a real fighter there, boss, old Pete commented, nodding respectfully toward Emma. Jackson's arm tightened around her shoulders. Don't I know it? Later, as they stood watching the sun rise fully over their land they had defended together, Jackson turned to Emma. When I found you outside that saloon, I thought I was offering you shelter, he said quietly. I never imagined you'd end up saving everything I care about. Emma leaned into his embrace. We saved each other, she corrected softly. As ranch hands began their morning chores and the world returned to normal around them, Emma and Jackson remained on the porch, watching their shared future unfold across the land they had both nearly lost and fiercely protected, not just a property now, but a true home built on the foundation of what had begun as a simple, desperate arrangement. 1 year to the day after Emma had huddled beneath the saloon awning, snow dusted Elkhorn Creek once again. But this time, she stood on the porch of Cole Ranch, wrapped in a warm shawl, watching Jackson return from the north pasture. Her hand rested gently on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of new life beneath her fingertips. So much had changed in 12 months. Blackwood had been convicted of multiple charges, his mining operation shut down after federal inspectors confirmed the illegal water diversion. The dam had been properly dismantled, restoring Silver Creek's natural flow. The valley had recovered from the drought, pastures green again, cattle fat and healthy. Emma had changed too. No longer the desperate woman with nowhere to turn, but mistress of Cole Ranch, respected in the community, and deeply loved. Jackson dismounted, handing the reins to Miguel before joining Emma on the porch. His smile was tender as he placed his hand over hers on her belly. How are my girls today? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Active, Emma replied, leaning into him. Your daughter has been kicking all morning. Stubborn. Like her mother. His teasing earned him a gentle elbow to the ribs. They moved inside to the warm kitchen where preparations for their anniversary dinner were underway. The house had been transformed during Emma's year of care. Polished floors gleaming, windows sparkling, faded furnishings refreshed. Fresh pine boughs decorated the mantel, a tradition Emma had established during their first Christmas together. I have something for you, Jackson said, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box, placing it in Emma's hand. Inside nestled a delicate gold locket inlaid with a small pearl. Emma opened it to find a miniature daguerreotype of her and Jackson from their visit to the photographer in Helena last month. It was my mother's, Jackson explained, fastening it around her neck. She always said it should go to the woman who brought life back to Cole Ranch. Emma blinked back tears. It's beautiful. Thank you. Later, as they sat before the fire after dinner, Emma brought out her own gift, a hand-carved cradle made from ranch pine. Jackson, she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. When did you make this? Evenings, these past months. He looked almost shy. My father made one for me. Seemed right to continue the tradition. Emma studied the perfect joints, the hand-rubbed finish, the small carved hearts at each corner. Our daughter will sleep well here. They sat in companionable silence, watching flames dance in the hearth. Outside, snow fell more heavily, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. A year ago today, Emma mused, you found me with nothing but a tattered suitcase and offered me a proposition. Jackson took her hand, rubbing his thumb across her wedding ring. Best business decision I ever made. Emma laughed softly. Is that what it was? A business decision? At first, the expression grew serious. I needed a wife. You needed a home. Simple arrangement. Not so simple in the end, Emma observed. No, Jackson agreed. Not simple at all. Emma thought about the journey they'd traveled, from strangers making a practical bargain to partners in every sense. The road had not been easy. Blackwood's defeat had been followed by months of legal proceedings, rebuilding relationships with neighboring ranchers, and establishing their place in the community as a true couple rather than a curiosity. Through it all, their bond had deepened. What began as mutual need had blossomed into profound love, the kind that weathered storms literal and figurative, that built something lasting from desperation's fragile beginning. Mrs. Farnsworth asked me yesterday when we're having a proper church wedding, Emma mentioned with amusement. Apparently our civil ceremony lacks romantic appeal. Jackson chuckled. And what did you tell her? That I married you once already, and that was quite sufficient. Emma shifted to face him. Though I did think perhaps a christening for the baby might be nice. Whatever you want, Jackson said, his hand returning to her rounded belly. Though I think we've scandalized the town enough without making them wait for a christening. Emma smiled. They've adjusted admirably to the notion that the homeless woman and the wealthy rancher might actually love each other. Shocking concept, Jackson agreed with mock seriousness. As night deepened around them, they moved to the porch despite the cold, a tradition they'd established months ago, ending each day with a moment of gratitude for the land and life they shared. Snowflakes glittered in the lantern light as Jackson wrapped a blanket around Emma's shoulders. The ranch spread before them, peaceful under its winter blanket, barn and corrals, bunkhouse where the hands were likely playing cards, pastures where cattle sheltered in windbreaks, all of it home in the deepest sense. Did you ever imagine, Emma asked softly, when you made your proposition that day, that we'd end up here? Jackson considered this. No, he admitted. I thought I was getting a housekeeper who wouldn't leave when winter came. His arms tightened around her. Instead, I got the love of my life. Emma leaned back against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. And I thought I was getting shelter from the storm. She placed his hand over the spot where their daughter kicked. Instead, I found everything I never dared wish for. Snow continued to fall gently around them, but neither moved to go inside. There was no need to rush. They had all the time in the world now, and a future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Montana sky.